Hello everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to today's edition of an Evening With series, where we will be speaking to some of the supremely talented women of Formula One, brought to you by F1 and FIA Girls on Track UK, managed by Motorsport UK. So thank you very much to all of you for putting on this special event tonight. I hope you are all well, staying positive, but of course, testing negative. And thank you so much for choosing to spend your time with us tonight. My name is Steph Turner, and I will be your host, asking the questions that you want to know the answer to. I currently co-host the Driven by Diversity podcast, which you can catch on all major podcast apps. And at the moment, I'm also supporting Rob Smedley's Electro-Heads program on their marketing and partnerships. Previous to that, I've also supported F1 in schools on event at Silverstone and in Abu Dhabi. So I'm a huge motorsport fan, just trying to combine my passion with profession, as I'm sure a lot of you are looking to do as well. Now, this month, we are going to give you the opportunity to join these live webinars where you will get to meet the various women of F1 who will provide you with valuable insight into their current roles. The reason? F1 is on a mission to diversify the sport and make it more inclusive. We, of course, saw this begin with their We Races One campaign that launched last season, and this mission has seen them team up with Motorsport UK to deliver these webinars, who themselves have a track record of empowering the next generation to enter the sport through initiatives such as Girls on Track. We want to champion and spotlight the existing female talent in F1 to inspire you on your own very path into the industry. Now, before I make official introductions to this evening's speakers, time for a little housekeeping. Don't forget that these sessions will be recorded, so you'll be able to watch them again and share with friends later on who may have missed it. Another important point of the evening is that I make sure that I point you in the direction of our chat function. So please do use this to ask our speakers any questions throughout the session, and we'll be saving as many as we can to ask during the Q&A towards the end of the evening. Please, though, if I just ask that you make sure that you use the chat and select everybody and not select to direct message, as any here won't be picked up. But just as a little warm up to get you introduced to the chat, I would love to know where you guys and girls are tuning in from around the world. So please let me know in the chat where you are tuning in from around the world and where you're based, and I'll be picking those up in a moment. We want this session to be as interactive and as engaging as possible, not just on the chat, but also on video. So don't be afraid to wave to the person in the video box next to you if you have your camera on in gallery view. However, once we get into things, feel free to switch to speaker view for the best viewing experience. It's also worth pointing out that because there are so many of you, which is absolutely amazing, you will be on mute throughout and you won't be able to unmute yourself. Wow, I'm just looking at the chat now. There's a lot coming through. We've got the UK, Lebanon, Spain, Philippines, Buenos Aires. Wow, that's amazing. Guys, we have gone global. This is incredible. And on that note, all of you around the world, we'll be hearing from Amelia Cozon, who is F1's Experiential Senior Executive, and then Amie Smith as well, who is Formula One's IT Systems Infrastructure Manager. Firstly, though, let's hear from Amelia and hear all about her role before moving on to Amie a little later on in the conversation. So, hello, Amelia. How are you doing?
Hi guys, well, nice to sort of meet you all. I've never done anything like this before, so I'm a little bit nervous, so do bear with me if I stumble a little bit or lose my thread. I've been told that you're a very friendly bunch, so please be kind to me. But yeah, to start, I'm a senior executive, experiential senior executive at F1. I say I'm quite new, though actually I've been here for over a year now, just over a year. But as you can imagine, 2020 has been a bit of a funny old year. So it's kind of, in some ways, felt like a really short period, but in other ways felt like a long period. So I sit within the commercial partnerships department at F1. And within that department, there's the sponsorship team sits there, the digital ads team sits there, and the licensing team. And my role sits within the sub-team of licensing. And that's because I look after the experiential licensing partnerships. And when most people hear that, they say, well, what on earth does that mean? And to start with, it's probably easier to go back with, okay, so what is licensing in the traditional sense? So licensing traditionally would be straightforward product licensing. And that is when a rights holder or a brand, for example, F1, will license the rights to their IP being intellectual property. So in other words, your brand's logo, your brand's identity, they'll license that out to another company. So a good example of that would be if you're walking down the street and you see someone wearing a Coca-Cola t-shirt, it's not Coca-Cola who have produced that t-shirt, because Coca-Cola know how to produce fizzy drinks, they don't know how to produce t-shirts. So they have licensed the right to their brand, the Coca-Cola brand, to that t-shirt manufacturer, because t-shirt manufacturers know how to make t-shirts. So they will have the rights from Coca-Cola to produce that t-shirt and then sell that t-shirt on behalf of Coca-Cola, and they would pay a royalty back to Coca-Cola for that. Another example might be a pair of Gucci sunglasses. Gucci don't know how to make sunglasses, they know how to do beautiful designs of clothes. So they will go to a company who do know how to make sunglasses, and they will license the right to their Gucci brand to that company to make the sunglasses on their behalf. And so that's the sort of a snapshot of what product licensing is. And as soon as you know what it is, you'll realize that it's everywhere. Whenever you see a Star Wars mug, that's not the team behind Star Wars who are creating that, that's another company. And F1 have a product licensing program as well, sort of traditional product licensing program. You might have seen just before Christmas, there was an announcement of a very fancy Formula One pen by the company Monte Grappa. That was a product licensing deal. So what is experiential licensing? Well, it's the same principle, but for experiences instead, rather than a sort of physical product. And so a good example of that would be Legoland. So Lego, the company, don't run Legoland, the theme parks that you get all over the world. Those theme parks are operated by a company who are experts at running events and theme parks. And another example might be Secret Cinema. Now, I'm not sure, I know there's a lot of people on the call who are perhaps calling from around the world, so they might not be familiar what Secret Cinema is. But certainly it was quite big in the UK, or has been over the last couple of years. And that was a company that put on, I think a couple of summers ago, an immersive experience for James Bond. And so they had the license to create a James Bond experience. So it was sort of an experiential licensing partnership. So that was a long-winded way, but hopefully a helpful way of explaining the types of partnerships that I look after at F1, so sort of F1 experiences. That's a pretty new program, so there's not a huge amount of projects out there right now. We've got one in the Netherlands, a gaming sim center that opened last year. That was our first. And we've got two more really big partnerships projects in the pipeline, which I wish I could tell you about, but they've not been announced yet. But if you stay tuned over the next hopefully 6 months to a year and into 2022, you'll hear all about those. And essentially it's all about taking F1 to an audience who perhaps haven't necessarily engaged with the sport before, or who are huge F1 fans but will never get a chance to go to a race, or perhaps unlikely to get a chance to go to a race. So it's just giving them new ways of being able to experience F1. Steph, I feel like I might have kind of gone over my time there, so you should have told me if I was rambling.
Not a problem. It was very sort of interesting.
Enough of an overview?
Yeah, no, brilliant introduction to your role at Formula One there, Amelia. It's great that you gave that context behind the role and what product licensing is versus experiential licensing, and giving that real life context, because I think that really then helps people to understand that it is everywhere, and it is something that you do see a lot in daily life. Some of those projects sound quite exciting that you're working on. You said that it's a relatively new area for Formula One. When you came into the business, you said you've only been here about a year or so. Was that a brand new role, or had you come in?
No, it was a brand new role, which was really exciting, because it meant I didn't feel like I had really big boots to fill, and I was able to kind of shape it myself. But it was an area of the business that F1 had been and still are looking to expand on. And I think since Liberty bought F1 back in 2017, they've been looking to take the brand to just more people. So often people will think that the only way to experience F1 is through either going to a race or turning on your TV and watching a race. And there are plenty of people who might not necessarily enjoy the watching of the race, but there's so many other parts of the F1 brand that can be so enjoyable for people, and particularly at the moment in the gaming space. I mentioned that we've opened up a gaming centre in the Netherlands. Gaming is becoming, as I'm sure you guys know, huge, bigger and bigger every year, and we have quite a lot of activity in the gaming space as well. We've got I think 6 or 7 gaming partners, and so that's sort of opened up a whole new area for us to kind of create experiences that are perhaps generated around the game. I mean, it's a lot easier to scale something like that rather than a full-on Grand Prix, which for obvious reasons is not that easy to take to a bigger audience. And if it helps, actually, the way we're thinking about how these F1 experiential products, the sort of impact we're hoping that they'll have, is a bit like the Netflix Drive to Survive series, which I'm sure if you guys are all F1 fans have probably watched the last 2 seasons. That has really opened up F1 to so many more people, and people who thought previously, oh, I'm not an F1 fan, it's not for me, they've discovered that actually it is. I mean, so we're hoping that a lot of our projects, when they come to fruition, will have a sort of similar impact.
Absolutely. It's really important that we start to try and reach these new audiences, because again, it then makes Formula One more accessible to more people across a load of different markets around the world. So that's really interesting, the sort of projects that you're working on. And as I say, I'm looking forward to seeing and hearing more about those in the future. But can you run through for us what a typical day would look like for you in your role?
Sure. It's going to sound like such cliche, but it really is. Every day is different, and it depends on, I guess, where you are with each project. So these aren't projects that say, will turn over every week. They're projects that can take months to sort of come to fruition, and sometimes even years. So the project which I said we've already launched in the Netherlands, that's at the stage where we're now trying to refine that product. So we're always working with a partner, looking at new things that we can introduce, tweaks we can make to the website, new types of experiences for the guests that are going to the gaming centre. It's got a food and beverage area, for example. So we're thinking about when we're through the pandemic, perhaps we can have there might be, say, over the weekend of the Mexican Grand Prix, there might be Mexican themed food served that weekend. So there's quite a lot of creative work going on for that project that we work with a partner on. And so we'll brainstorm ideas and we'll think about what's on brand for us and what's also practical. So kind of strategizing work. And then for the projects which are still in the early stages, and we're still kind of trying to figure out exactly how they might look for us and the partner, and sort of to be I guess to actually get the deal done. So in some instances, some of these projects I can't tell you about because we're really close on, but the contract's not actually being signed. And so at the moment, a lot of my days are spent talking to the legal department, going through contracts, saying, can we let them have that? Or they've pushed back on this, or no, we need to hold firm on that. Or talking to our finance department, or perhaps those projects that are a little further down the line. So the contract is signed, so we know they're going to happen, but they're not yet launched. We're at the stage of brainstorming on brand names and logos. So I might have a meeting with our brand studio team to talk about what the logo should look like or what they should be called, or talking to our marketing team about how we can support them on social media. Again, a long-winded answer to your question, but it really depends on where we are with each project. So the day can start with a call with the legal department and finish with a brainstorm session on what we want to do sort of from a creative perspective for one of our products.
It sounds like you have quite a lot of collaboration across different departments and teams within the business, which is brilliant. And that leads us on very nicely to bringing on Amie Smith, who is our IT infrastructure systems manager at Formula One. Hello, Amie. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thank you. How are you?
Yes, not too bad. Thank you. So we've had a little introduction overview from Amelia on her role. Could you sort of give us a breakdown on what your role involves? It sounds very mysterious and interesting and clever. Can you tell us more about what it is that you do?
Sure. I think it's sadly not quite as glamorous as Amelia sounds. I don't get to throw around brand names now. I'm just going to talk about IT. But yeah, so basically I manage the team to look after the corporate infrastructure at F1, sorry. So that covers basically from your entry point, so your service desk, your support, your service delivery, right up until the systems architects to design and maintain the infrastructure that the IT runs at Formula One. I suppose a little bit of background about me. So I've actually worked at F1 for 7 years now, which feels like a very long time, but also seems to have flown by very quickly. In that time, I have done a number of roles. I actually started at F1 as a trainee service desk myself. So I went in at entry level and I've worked my way up. I did a bit of software development. I then went into be the support supervisor, the IT support manager, and now the IT systems infrastructure manager. So I have sort of done a little bit of everything in the IT team, but going well, I suppose.
That's fantastic to have such a breadth of experience within the department as well, because then I guess it means that you really understand how that function works within the business.
Hopefully. Hopefully. Yeah, and I just think, it was something for me. I've joined a few of the other of these sessions, and it was something I was really keen to sort of put out there is, it's going in at that entry level is just as important. I think, it's sometimes a bit more exciting to want to go in at a bit higher level or want to look for that end role. And actually, if you can get in at the ground, you can work your way up. And, obviously that worked out for me. And I know we always support talent within F1. So it's a really good thing, I think, to try and get
definitely to have that growth and progression and have the opportunity to do that within a company is fantastic. And that leads us nicely into a question that we've had in from Caitlin McMillan. What is the best way to go about inquiring for work experience? Would you say for your role in particular, perhaps?
I mean, I would imagine just reaching out to people. We've got an active team in HR who look after our LinkedIn page. Reaching out to other people on LinkedIn. I know that I'm quite open to connections. If anyone has messages, I'm quite open at responding to people. It's definitely something that I would like to help people. I've been in that position of trying to look for work experience, and I know how it feels like you literally can't get anything. So yeah, just reach out to people, connect where you can.
Being sort of persistent, but not too annoying, but persevering and making the connections and networking, as you say, is really key. Amelia, if we swing to you, do you have any input on that in terms of how you would go about gaining work experience?
Yeah, I would agree with Amie. I think the first port of call is always our LinkedIn page, and from what I understand, all our job vacancies are always posted there, as well as internships. But I also am a big fan of just getting in touch with people on LinkedIn. If there's a particular industry that you're interested in, and you find someone at F1 that sounds like they've got the right sort of job title, just drop them a note, because even though, and certainly I know, and it sounds like Amie would be the same, I would never mind when people do that, and I will always try my best to help if I can, or direct them to someone who I think can help. Because whilst we always try and HR will always, as much as possible, be aware of all the various jobs that we have going on, but the fact is often the kind of, we'll be thinking about, there could be this role coming up, or it might be useful to have an intern in, say, 6 months time, and this is the sort of information that as a team we'd talk about, but has not necessarily got to the point that it's being signed off and is being advertised on LinkedIn. But if we have in the back of our mind that, actually there's someone who contacted me 6 months ago and seemed to be interested, then often that's the first port of call. And so you just never know where anything is going to lead. And I got my job at F1 through sort of a similar means. It was an inbox message on LinkedIn. So you don't always have to go through the traditional routes, for sure. Absolutely. And what's the worst that can happen as well, through just reaching out by someone? If they don't get back to you, well, they're lost.
Definitely. If you don't try, you'll never know. But yeah, That's really interesting that you actually got your job through messaging someone, and it just goes to show that there's not just one way. It's not just applying for jobs that are advertised. So really do try all avenues. Amie, I know that you said that you have been at F1 now for 7 years, and it seems like a long time, but also really short at the same time. Over that time, I'm sure you've worked on a variety of projects. What has been something you've really enjoyed working on, and what did your specific involvement give to the overall output or result?
I think something I'm quite proud of, which isn't really what you asked, but I'm going to go with it.
Go for it.
is with actually the handling of moving to working from home. You know, at the start of the pandemic, we're quite lucky. You know, we were prepared to support people working remotely because of the nature of our business means that we do. But I'm very proud of my team that we managed to, you know, get everyone in the company working from home in the space of 2 weeks. We had people easily connected with the hardware they needed, able to work, and it actually went without a hitch. And I'm very proud of that as something to have coordinated, because I think it's sort of not what I hear happened at some places. And yeah, that's something I'm quite proud of.
Yeah, I can imagine there was probably quite a lot of work involved with that, because it was kind of unexpected. So I can imagine there was a lot of work for you to do, and with the team as well. And leading on from that, how big is your team, and how many people do you have to work with and collaborate with?
We're actually quite a small team. I suppose I don't know how aware people on the call are of how big F1 is, but we're actually quite a small company, really, for the brand name that we are. We're actually only about, I'm going to get it wrong, but I think about 700. So the IT team is actually really small. We're under 30 in IT to support all of the races, all of the offices and the business. So yeah, quite a small team, really.
And in your role, you mentioned race teams there, do you support sort of the people that go out to the races as well, trackside, or are you more focused on in sort of like internal office based kind of work?
Yeah, so we support all of the end users, I'll call them. So, you know, people at the race working on their laptop, we support them. A member of my support team goes out to every race to be supporting on site, but there is a separate, well, part of IT, but there's an operations team who look after the infrastructure for the race environment.
Okay, fab. Amelia, let's go back to you now. Can you tell us how did you start in terms of your education? Did that influence where you sort of progressed career-wise? How did you start things off?
I probably wouldn't have said my education. It wasn't. So I studied geography and French at university. And I think at the point of when I was trying to decide what to study at university, or I decided I wanted to go to university, I thought I didn't have a clear idea of what I wanted to do. When I'd been much younger, I had wanted to be a lifeguard because I loved the beach. But as I got older, I realized that probably in the winter wasn't going to be so attractive, and there were a few other negatives to being a lifeguard. But around 17, 18, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I guess I was a bit geeky. I loved geography, and I liked French. I thought, if I do geography, I know I enjoy that, and if I do French, then I get to have a year studying in France, and so it's 4 years then before I have to go out into the real world. So that was my thinking behind what I studied. And then it was in around maybe my first year of uni, I went to Wimbledon for the very first time. A friend of mine got tickets, and I had just the best day ever. And there was around me all of these sort of kids that looked like my age, students working there, and I thought that would be the best summer job ever. And so I had a friend of a friend who was working there, so I found out how they got their job, and they sent me a link for an application form for the following year's championship from IMG. IMG is a huge sport media entertainment agency, and at the time IMG represented Wimbledon in many ways, including running their retail program on site at Wimbledon. And so I The following year, I got a job working in the Wimbledon shop, and just had the best 2 weeks ever. And it was sort of at that point that I thought, I need to work in the sports industry. This is definitely what I want to do. I wasn't sure exactly in what area, just I wanted to work in the sports industry. The camaraderie around it, it was also the event aspect that I really loved as well. It was just such a great place to be, and everyone seemed so happy to be working there, and not just the students, sort of at the time, I guess the adults who seemed to have like the sort of the bigger jobs. So I did that for a number of summers, and then that led to a full-time job at IMG working on Wimbledon in the licensing department. So I started off at IMG in the licensing department, which is where their Wimbledon retail operations sat, because they also had some licensing partnerships. You're probably one of the most famous being Wimbledon and Ralph Lauren. That's a very famous commercial partnership, and that is a licensing and sponsorship partnership. So I spent the next 7 years at IMG, a number of those working on Wimbledon, a few of those on the Open Golf, Royal Ascot, and then I did a little bit of work on fashion brands as well, which was great because it gave me a sort of a different angle and different type of experience, and it meant I was able to go up the ladder, but I really missed the sports side of it. And so at that point, it's what I thought I really need to do. Or it was time to move on. IMG were great, but like with everyone in their careers, I think it's sort of very natural to want to move on and try different things and sort of see what else is out there. And I felt I'd come to the end of my road at IMG. And it just so happened that I also was a big petrol head, a big F1 fan, and this role came up, and it was perfect.
Yeah, your family are quite the family of petrol heads, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. And I was sort of wary of saying this because I don't want any of you to think that you have to be a huge F1 fan and know absolutely everything about it in order to work at F1 or even in the motorsport industry, because that is far from it. There are, and I'm sure Amie will vouch for this as well, there are plenty of people in the company who are not mega fans at all. I mean, you grow to love the sport, but it's by no means a requisite. And I was worried when I started that even though I really enjoyed F1, I thought, I'm not a mega fan. What if I get sort of ostracized because I don't know absolutely every last detail about the sport? But yeah, I have been a big sort of petrol head. My dad worked for Jaguar for a long time. In fact, he was one of the engineers for one of the original E-types. My mum worked in PR for many motor companies a number of years ago now. My brother works for Aston Martin. So yeah, it's sort of in the blood. And actually, it was a bit of a joke when I got this job. Everyone used to always laugh that my brother was a prodigal son because he was the one who worked for Aston Martin, and it was such a joy for my dad to have him working there. And then I got the F1 job and took the biscuits. So I'm now the favourite.
Brilliant. Love that little anecdote. Amie, so Amelia mentioned that when she was younger, she wanted to be a lifeguard, but when you were younger, you actually wanted to be a journalist for NME, the magazine. Talk to me about that and how that sort of changed and transformed into where you are now as an IT manager.
Well, I think at first I realised it wasn't the 1970s anymore, so I wasn't going to be able to write about what I wanted to. I think it was one of those things. I think in a way that Amelia's family obviously are very into motorsport. My family are very into music. It's what I grew up around. My family are not. My family are not motorsport people. I don't think my parents have even ever seen an F1 race, if I'm honest with you. But when I met my boyfriend, now husband, he's very, very keen F1 fan. He comes from a family of motorsport fans. His dad's the ex-British rallycross driver, so it's ingrained in them. And it became over Sundays, and he'd have the F1 on, and slowly I became more and more interested in it. And I think now I'm probably one of the biggest F1 fans out of my friends, which is a complete change of event. So yeah, I went to uni and I actually did a media and cultural studies degree. I saw one of the other questions was asking about a degree to get into infrastructure, so I can't really help there, I'm afraid, because I definitely didn't have a appropriate degree, as you would call it. I finished my degree, came out of that, sort of thought, right, what am I going to do in the real world? Went into customer services at Sainsbury's, did that for a few years, and then thought, right, what am I going to do? Don't really want to do this, which is how I got into IT. Actually, from my point of view, it's from the customer service side, which is what I really enjoy doing, which is what led me into the service desk and to where I'm at now, because I think the largely overlooked part of what we do as a team is actually that customer support, that customer service side of it. You know, the technical part is obviously a very big deal, but without the customer service, it can go wrong very fast. So yeah.
Absolutely. It's really interesting to hear both of your stories of how you came to be in your respective roles, because they're two very different stories, but it's also really nice to know that there's not just one way in. You can come in from doing something completely unrelated, even at university, both of you doing unrelated degrees, but you can still find your way to whatever it is that you want to be doing, which is fantastic. If we sort of look at where we are now, obviously with the pandemic, we have moved into sort of home-based working. As you mentioned, Amie, you had a lot of involvement with that transition. We've had a question in from Cassidy Charette, and she's asked, now that remote work is the current norm, do you think there will be more opportunities for remote work outside of the UK? Either of you, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a great question, and I would love to say yes. And I think in reality, it's going to vary from company to company, and the requirements of each company, and probably each job function as well. But certainly, I know that there are people within F1 who their home was, or their sort of, I guess their bigger home life was abroad. And so since March last year, they've been in Italy or France or wherever it might be, and some even in the US. And that's worked perfectly for the last year or so. So I'd like to think that we would be able to continue that. And actually, I know there was someone in our team who we recently recruited, probably about 2 months ago, who is permanently based in the US. And so it's not just the pandemic, which is sort of meaning that she's based over there. That's where the role is. And the company obviously decided that it wasn't an issue and she was who they wanted. So they've sort of found a way for that to work. So yes, I think from my end.
And Amie, do you have any thoughts or opinions on that, or how it might go in the future?
I mean, I think as Amelia sort of said, it does depend on the job role.
Yeah.
Looking at IT, for example, you know, we are quite hands-on. You need to be able to touch the IT kit, you know.
Yeah.
I know we're living in a world of cloud, but there's still always going to be, you know, hardware that you need to be dealing with. So from an IT point of view, sadly, probably not yet. You know, we have offices there in London and in Kent, and there would be a requirement for someone to be able to get to those offices. But I think, yeah, definitely in other roles in the business, I would like to think that there's that opportunity there.
Absolutely. And I think it's important also to remember that we can look at motorsport as a wider industry. There are so many other opportunities as well, that potentially there is that opportunity to work when you're based abroad with a sort of a remote role. So we touched on sort of education and studying earlier and what you both studied, but it's not just education that is a route into a role. You've also got things like apprenticeships and internships. Have you got, either of you, any advice to younger listeners who are interested in your field that might be wondering what they can do that isn't just education? Because as you said, you both didn't study what you're now working in. Have you got any sort of thoughts or opinions around apprenticeships or internships and whether they might bring the value that would enable someone to succeed in your role?
Yeah, I would say any and all experience is valuable. You never know what anything is going to lead to, or what any doors that could be opened. And so as a general rule, it's sort of say yes to everything. But also, I think it's probably worth remembering that it's not, there are other ways to get into F1 or the motorsport industry. And I think it's perhaps sometimes the less obvious routes. So I think I touched on that I was at IMG previously, which is a big sports agency, and there's loads of companies a bit like IMG, who are very much involved in the motorsport world and sports world generally as well. Whether they're agencies like IMG or within the world of F1, whether they are a supplier for teams, or somehow involved in the operational aspect of putting on a Grand Prix. So it's not necessarily a case of thinking, how do I get experience at F1 or another motorsport entity? It might be a case of thinking, well, I can, and I keep using the example of IMG, but that's just what I know. IMG, they have their fingers in so many different pies of different brands and sports and events. And so, for example, when you think of F1, they have a huge number of commercial partnerships on the sponsorship side, and there's very often agencies that manage those relationships. And so it might be a case of seeing if you can get an internship at one of those agencies that manages one of the big partnerships for F1, or similar. Or, for example, if you're really interested in the actual putting on of a Grand Prix, DHL is our partner on that side of things, and you might not think about going to DHL to get a job in order to get into the motorsport industry, but DHL are hugely involved in making the Grand Prix happen for us, and there will absolutely be a department of DHL that focuses on that, I imagine. And so I guess it's sort of just thinking a bit more outside the box of other routes into the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's key, because the ecosystem of the industry is so big, and there are lots of little different avenues in which you can access a role or an opportunity or an internship. Amie, do you have any thoughts on that in terms of apprenticeships and internships?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose kind of along the same vein as Amelia's saying, really, is that it's, you know, it doesn't always have to be motorsport, or it doesn't always have to be sport. You know, if you can get experience in what it is that you're interested in, you know, so from a IT standpoint, for example, you know, when we're interviewing, I am looking for experience in IT. You know, if someone had experience in IT at Aston Martin, it's not going to make it much different to experience in IT elsewhere. You know, it's as long as there's a similar kind of environment, it doesn't necessarily have to be motorsport to then get your foot into the door of more motorsport. You know, it can be any sort of experience is valid, really. And I think if you can show that you've been interested in getting that experience in the first place, that means more.
Yeah, definitely. So you've got your experience in previous roles or internships, etc. But we've had a question in from Polly, specifically for you, Amie, actually, and it's around IT related courses. So I know we discussed, obviously, education. You don't necessarily need to be studying it relating to your role, but in terms of courses that you can pick up later on in life. She's asked, being an IT systems infrastructure manager in the automotive space, are there any IT related courses affecting the automotive industry, covering topics such as embedded systems, that have helped you navigate through your job? So have you been involved in any courses that you've taken?
I've done most of my learning on the job, if I'm honest. I've done a few courses through the years in various functions. I did a service desk analyst, the Service Desk Institute. They run a very good course for service desk analysts. That really helped me when I first joined, because it threw me right into what I was meant to be doing. There's the ITIL, which is sort of a IT best practice framework, which I am a very big fan of. Done quite a few of those courses, so they're good. But I mean, it really depends on what you're doing, you know, at that point in time, what systems the company you're at are using. You know, IT is an ever-changing, ever-evolving topic, and it's something that you kind of are continually learning, because it changes day by day, and there's always something newer, better, shinier that's coming out, and it's just about keeping up, really. So I think you actually do most of the learning on the job, which I know probably doesn't help people listening who wanted to get into it, but again, it's that having that interest in it and keeping abreast. And, you know, even if you don't necessarily have the knowledge or the experience with the system, it's being aware of it and just, you know, being open to learning, and, you know, showing that you have that dedication to want to learn and to want to pick up these new skills, because, you know, it isn't something that stands still. It is always changing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think being proactive in whatever the role is that you want to go into is really, really key, and it's something that employers will pick up on straight away. But it's also interesting to know that there are opportunities to learn on the job. There are opportunities to go onto courses and sort of have that growth and progression as well. Amelia, if we just switch to you, have you had to go on any courses, or do you know of any courses that might benefit someone looking to go into a field such as yours?
No, I feel, thinking back now, I feel like surely I must have done some courses, but I, like Amie, it's been very much learning on the job. And I think that is pretty true for a lot of people who are in the kind of commercial space, like me. It's so, it's one of those things that a lot of people perhaps in the commercial world might say that they did a business degree or they did a marketing degree, and for sure that is always going to be helpful, but there is nothing that quite is a match for just learning on the job. And I think everyone has got to start somewhere. And it's amazing how because you might say you'll get a job out of uni or out of school, and you'll think, oh, how's this ever going to translate to what I really want to do? But you'll be amazed at how, if you break down a job and you look at actually all the skill sets that you need for that job, it's amazing how you can then apply those to other things, because nearly all jobs will have require you to have communication skills. I'm kind of thinking in my kind of world now, when I think about what you would say you would need for my job, and it's being able to communicate well with people, being able to manage partners, and I think those are quite sort of they're very broad skills, and actually can be pulled from lots of different things. So I'd hate for any of you to get too fixated on thinking that unless I have this particular qualification, unless you want to be a doctor, or on the engineering side for obvious reasons, but certainly in the commercial space, it's just getting business experience, which is going to be the best thing for you.
Yeah, I think it's really important that if you have a goal in mind or a role in mind, to sort of make a plan, but it doesn't matter where your starting point is, as long as you know where the end goal is. And even throughout that journey, it doesn't matter if your then plan changes or the goal changes, as long as you break it down into little steps and just sort of take little steps to get towards where you want to go to. All experience is really helpful. So yeah, you'll make it there as long as you persevere and are dedicated to it. Now, Formula One, obviously being in the motorsport industry, it's a very male-dominated industry. And there may be some girls listening here tonight who might think that, they're not confident about pursuing a role in the industry because of that. What would you say to these girls who potentially aren't sure that there's a place for them in motorsport? How would you convince them that there absolutely is a rightful and valuable place for each and every one of them, should they decide to pursue their passion or career in this industry?
Well, you might find that it's probably quite helpful having Amie and I here, because we're based in different offices, and I want to speak for Amie, but she is in much more of the male end of the world than I am, and I can honestly say that I don't ever feel that I'm actually working in a really male-dominated industry. And I think that partly is because of F1 and the people there. You're never made to feel that somehow you are a minority, or because you are a woman, that somehow you're not quite as good as the men. I mean, it's very progressive. Well, not progressive, it's how it should be. And so I don't... It's honestly not ever been something that I've felt has been a problem for me in this role. And I feel like I'm afforded as much opportunity as the men. And again, I'm very fortunate that I have a great immediate team. My boss is male, but he is just sort of unbelievably supportive, and doesn't treat me in any other way as he shouldn't. But like I say, I feel like Amie might be able to speak from perhaps a different angle, as I know you are in a more male-dominated office than I am.
True. I mean, yes, it would be a lie to say that I'm not in a more male-dominated office. But I mean, I can't say it's ever really fazed me. It's an odd thing. I think for my first sort of probably 4 years at the company, I was the only girl in the department, and the only time I ever really noticed it, to be honest, was departmental drinks, and suddenly you become very aware that it's you and 23 men, and then that's a bit odd. But you really don't. You're not made to feel any different, and I certainly haven't noticed any issues with being female. I've obviously managed to work my way up within the IT team, and I don't think gender has had anything to do with that. I've definitely faced comments when I've gone to training courses outside of the company, and you will get that. I think it's very sad fact, but people are judgmental, but it's just something that actually events like this are really helpful, because it just shows you that there are women everywhere, and that women should be everywhere they want to be. So don't let it hold you back just because you're a girl, because why should it?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And that's really, really powerful. But it's also great to know that Formula One sounds like a really inclusive and sort of like an inclusive place to work. And it sort of sounds like it's kind of like a family feeling, which is really, really nice to hear. On that note, let's dive into some questions that we've had coming through on the chat. So Caitlin Wilcox, she asks, because you're both big fans of F1, who are your favourite teams and drivers? Amie?
I'm a big Sebastian Vettel fan, have been ever since I started watching it. I think I started watching it in probably about 2011, which I'm going to be a bad Sebastian fan now and say I think that's when he won the championship, so that's probably why I'm such a big Seb fan. But I've stuck with him. I will admit I'm not really partial to any particular team, so I just go for where Seb is. So Aston Martin.
Fab stuff. And Amelia, how about you?
I'm a Perez fan. I think even though I've always been an F1 fan, inevitably this last 2020 season I've been particularly tuned into it, and I love to see everything that he achieved this year, and from the heartache to the glory as well. And I just think he seems like a really nice guy as well. And on the team front, for some similar reason, actually, I've kind of always felt that Racing Point have been a bit of an underdog, but they've got this kind of great fighting spirit. So I've loved kind of seeing them do well. And I guess it's just sort of a happy coincidence that they're now going to be Aston Martin. And I guess for family reasons, that should be my third team as well now.
That's very true. And you're both now supporting the same team in Aston Martin then.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So let me just see if there's any other questions that we've got coming through. Marika asks, this is for you, Amie, is web and application development for F1 part of your department or area that you manage?
It's not, no, that's another team. So that's away from me, sadly.
Oh, okay. So what department is that? Do they have a particular name, and what area do they sit in?
I mean, I suppose it depends what type of development you're looking for. We have a software development team to sit outside of us, but then the website's actually looked after by a team from our London office. So the F1 website that you're familiar with is one team.
If it helps, actually, I can just jump in on there, as there is the digital team that's based in the office where I'm based at, which like the digital team is kind of like a very broad umbrella term, and then underneath that you've got digital product team, you've got the kind of digital advertising team, you've got the social media team. So it really depends on what area specifically of the kind of the digital side that you are looking at.
Fab stuff. Thanks for answering that one. We've also had one in from Kristen. So when thinking about working in F1, there's the corporate side, but also the team side, which is very true. Which roles would you say are most common on both sides? Would it be most things back office, so commercial, marketing, IT, etc.? When
you say most popular, do you think she means just the most numerous?
Yeah, exactly. I think so.
Well, certainly the commercial team is really big, and again, commercial is quite like a broad catch-all phrase, and lots of different companies will kind of split it out in different ways. But from an F1 side, you've got those managing the sponsorship relationships, you've got those managing the licensing relationships, and then sort of within commercial, you could also look at the media rights team, so those looking after our relationships with broadcasters, and the likes of our relationships with Netflix. So yeah, it's a really, really wide team on the commercial side.
Brilliant. I guess with that, you've got, as I said before, the ecosystem is so big, and you've got very similar roles within teams as in Formula One, because they've got to communicate with each other.
Yes, yeah. Oh, sorry, that was the other part of the question, was it? Yeah, and on the team side, yeah, the teams inevitably are probably a little bit smaller, so their sort of commercial team might not be, say, quite the size of the F1 commercial team, but often there is a counterpart in each team. So each team will have a head of marketing or a director of marketing or a partnerships manager. Again, they all kind of call them slightly different things, but yeah, you'll often find the kind of the equivalent in all the teams of each role.
Yeah. Cool. So we've had actually a really interesting question, which I'd love to know the answer to. And this one is from Florencia Anderson. So what is something you wish you knew when you were younger and had no experience? Amie, if we swing to you first.
I suppose just the knowledge that, you know, any experience counts, really. I was quite lucky when I was younger. I did quite a bit of work experience, genuinely, not just saying it, but just by emailing. That was before the days of LinkedIn. So it was finding email addresses that you could find online, you know, sending an email saying I'm really interested in this. And through that, I did a bit of experience in a few places. I did some experience at Bliss magazine, if anyone that remembers that. Yeah. I'm showing my age. I worked at London Zoo for a bit. I did some internship in their what they call press office for a couple of weeks. And, you know, that all came about just by emailing people and, you know, showing a bit of interest. And I think back to sort of my earlier point of that's really, you know, showing that you've got that interest and you want to go out there and you want to get a bit of experience really helps, because, you know, you all start with no experience. You know, everyone finishes school or finishes uni or wherever you are, and, you know, you've all got nothing. So anything that you can have to say, you know, I've gone out and got this and I've really wanted to learn, so I've done this, just helps put you above other people.
Absolutely, I completely agree with that, and it's really good advice. Amelia, what are your thoughts on that?
It's a tough one. I think I would say not to be scared of change, or if things don't work out. I certainly know when I was younger, and, you know, even now, I think it's quite a natural thing. Whenever there's a big change, I mean, in your life in general, but of course thinking more sort of on the professional side now, whether it's, say, a restructure and your team changes, or say your boss leaves, or you lose a client, or anything like that, I think your natural reaction is, oh, this is, you know, a disaster, or it's not going to be the same, or everything was really good, how am I going to cope, what if it doesn't work out? But even though it feels scary at the time, when I think back to all of the times in my career when there's been something that has either gone wrong, or it's not been what I wanted, or things have gone in a different direction, I look back now and I would not change things now, because I can see that, again, it sounds corny to say everything happens for a reason, but it really does. And when one door closes, I'm a firm believer in that another door really does open. And just to give an example, in my sort of earlier on in my career, when I'd worked on Wimbledon for many years, and as you all heard from earlier on, I loved it. I thought it was the best thing ever. And then through various changes, it meant that I was no longer able to work on Wimbledon, and I was moving across to work on Royal Ascot. And I thought, I love tennis, I don't like horses, Ascot's not as good as Wimbledon, this is going to be awful, I'm going to be miserable. And it was just the best thing for me. I ended up loving it. I got so much more experience, and I would not change it now. And it then led to all these other things that led to me ultimately having this job now. So don't fear change, basically.
Definitely, that is some sound advice there. From my personal experience, it's always when I'm out of my comfort zone, that is when, you know, you're going to make it through, it's going to be fine. So just do it, take the plunge, and you'll be really happy with the result afterwards. Any opportunity, whether it's one that you're scared about or not, is always an opportunity for growth.
Definitely. And I was petrified about doing this, but I'm so glad I did, because I've been really enjoying it.
Brilliant. That was really, really good to hear. So just the last couple of questions now as we wrap up for tonight. I can't believe where the time has gone. Question for Amie from Sarah Bannon. Would cybersecurity be in your department? If so, how important would it be in your role?
So it's part of the IT department. We have an InfoSec team who look after the cybersecurity, but obviously it's such an important part of everything that we do. It's basically embedded from the ground up within IT because it has to be. It is such an important thing, and it's an ever-growing part of the team. That's something, if you're interested in, go for it, because cybersecurity is just getting more and more important by the day, as we see. You see it in the news daily, and no one wants to be that next company there. So yeah, it's very, very important.
Yes, very important, especially with the transition to working from home. I say the transition, we've all been doing it about a year now, but been seeing things in the news as well about cybersecurity and working from home. So absolutely. Simran, we've a question from Simran for Amelia. So what questions do you think you need to, what skills do you think you need to manage partner relationships? And have you ever had any challenges in this area? For example, maybe difficult or demanding partners?
Oh, every day. Yeah. That is, if someone said to me, what's the hardest part of the job? It's every day. It's managing all the different stakeholders. I think that's, you've hit the nail on the head. That is the crux of partnership management, whether it's a sponsorship partnership or a licensing partnership, media rights partnership. I think when the person who's managing it, so that would, in this case, me, you are within the company, I always think of it as that I'm the voice for the partner. Mm-hmm. So I'm having to sort of fight for my partner's cause within the broader company. But at the same time, you've also got to bear in mind that you need to think about what's right for the company at a broader scale. And often I find I'm kind of fighting with myself a bit on that, because you care a huge amount about this partner because you've perhaps worked with them from the beginning to develop an idea, create this project, bring it to fruition, launch it, and you really want to fight for them, whether it's to get another social media post or to get them an extension on their contract. But of course, you've then kind of got to take that to the kind of the broader company and perhaps fight for why it's good for us to do this for our partner. So yeah, it is tricky, and you do have sometimes just difficult personalities as well, and that's a really good and really important skill for people if they want to go into the partnerships world. Being able to get along with lots of different people and to listen as well. And if someone's not happy or a partner's not happy, figuring out, okay, it sounds silly, but a lot of people will just kind of hear that someone's angry and they won't stop to think, okay, what actually is it that they're not happy about, and trying to figure out a solution for them whilst also keeping everyone else happy. So yeah, it's a juggling act for sure.
Absolutely. Lots of skills and transferable skills as well that you can bring into that from other roles and other jobs. So
absolutely, yeah.
Brilliant. Just as we're wrapping up, we've got a few other questions coming in here. Just want to check with you ladies if you're okay to stay around for another 5 to 10 minutes after session to answer any other questions that have come in. Is that okay?
Yeah, of
course, no problem.
So for everyone who isn't staying on and has to run off somewhere, thank you so much for your time. It's been brilliant having you all on here for this session. It's been a really, really special evening, and I hope that Amelia and Amie have answered your questions and your queries and sort of given you the insight and advice that you have been after. Do make sure though, if you do have to run off, please do follow Formula One on their socials, as well as FIA Girls on Track UK and Motorsport UK as well. With Girls on Track, we do have the community page on Facebook, so make sure you join that one as well, where you'll be able to connect with like-minded people through that page, but also sign up to any of the remaining webinars on this month, and also you'll be able to find recordings of any that you've missed. And there should be the links in the chat now. So if you just click on those, that should take you through to follow and sign up for the webinars and follow the social pages. thank you so much as well again to Formula One, Girls on Track UK and Motorsport UK for putting on this wonderful session. It's been brilliant, and I hope Amelia and Amie, you have both enjoyed it as well as I have, and thank you so much as well to you for your time.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for having us. It's been a pleasure.
Has.
There will be a survey as well to anyone still listening coming your way. It shouldn't take any longer than 5 or so minutes, but we'd really appreciate your feedback. So if you do have the time, please do have a look at that survey once we've sent that through, and take just 5 minutes to have a look at that and complete. And we'll catch you on the other webinars later this month as well. So we're having lots of messages in, Amelia and Amie, saying thank you. So I think everyone loved it. They said it was very inspiring to listen to your experiences and suggestions. We did have a question from Andreas, I believe. What would be your best professional advice? So I guess any kind of, what's your key advice that you would give to anyone looking to enter the industry? I guess the wider industry, not just F1 specifically.
Amie, do you want to go first?
Thanks. I'd say it's just, and it's such a hard one because I am giving advice I should take myself, which is just be confident. You know, be confident in yourself. You know, you are good enough, you can do it, and just, you know, if you go in there with that attitude, that comes across. You know, show your passion, show your interest, really give people an idea of what it is that you want to do and who you are, because that definitely helps. Amelia?
Thanks, Amie. I would, this is maybe a bit sort of, I don't know, a bit more, not maybe left field, but I remember a few years ago, someone suggested to me about getting a mentor. And I don't mean kind of, you know, going on Google and sort of finding someone and paying for the services. It's just as you kind of go through your life in general and career, you might sort of come across people who you really connect with, and it might be that they've got a bit more experience than you or a few years older, and you're perhaps friends as well, or you hit it off as friends, and or they've had a similar career trajectory to you, and you just feel like there's someone that you can talk to, and having them as someone that you can kind of go back to at different points in your career when you're perhaps wanting to bounce ideas off them. For example, my very first boss at IMG, I kind of think of as sort of one of my mentors, and I always think that I wouldn't ever make a major career decision now without kind of talking to her about it or saying, what do you think about this? And I remember when I was offered the job at F1, I spoke to her about it, like, oh, I could do this, what are your thoughts? And it's really helpful to kind of have someone who you sort of feel like is looking out genuinely for your best interests. And it might sound like you might think, oh, but who's going to want to do that? But it's amazing how the mentor will also get as much out of it as the mentoree. And certainly I know, if that's a word, mentoree, you know what I mean? Certainly I know that how beneficial I've found it to have a few people like that in my career who's like the relationships have kind of been fostered naturally. And so I know that I would always sort of do that when the right person came along for me as well. And it might just be that it's someone more junior in your team, or you know, you can come about in lots of different ways, but I think it's quite useful to have that type of person in your life. Yeah,
that's a really interesting point, actually, and it's something that's kind of overlooked in terms of how sort of insightful it can be and how helpful it can be. I know myself, I've got a mentor, and she's been absolutely wonderful because they've got the experience and they've lived through, especially if it's a role that you're wanting to go for, they've lived through that experience, so they have such a wealth of knowledge that they'll be able to impart onto you. But also, actually, talking about reverse mentoring, that's also an opportunity out there where younger people can mentor more senior people, so junior and senior, and there's a lot that can be learnt from there as well, which is really good. Question from Marta, and this is to Amie, but I guess we can apply it to Amelia as well. How is the hiring process? What is the hiring process like in Formula One, and how does it differ from other industries? So I guess you can relate it there to previous jobs you've had, whether or not they've been in motorsport.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that different, I don't think. You know, a lot of our hiring I suppose the first thing is how to get the interview or how to apply is genuinely, they all get posted on our LinkedIn page. There's a Formula One careers webpage where all jobs are listed. And this is actually something that I get people contacting me on LinkedIn about quite a lot, as, you know, how do I apply for a role? And I kind of hate going back with the answer and saying when it's published, because, you know, it is that simple. And, you know, I suppose I got my job at F1 through, I can't remember which one now, but read.com or one of those sort of websites. You know, that's where it was advertised, that's where I applied. And so, yeah, it's not that different really. I mean, it's literally just a case of applying. And I know that's probably not great advice because it doesn't really help set it aside from anything else, but it is that simple, you know.
I guess it's good to hear that though, because it does mean that if you've already gone for a job and been successful and now you're looking to maybe potentially come into motorsport and into Formula One, there's nothing to be worried about because the recruitment process is pretty similar to anywhere else. Was that the same experience for you, Amelia?
Yeah, I would agree. I think certainly when I came into F1, my role was advertised on LinkedIn, and I remember seeing it actually, and not I don't know why I didn't really, for whatever reason, I felt that it wasn't quite right for me. I can't remember the exact specifics. And anyway, I think it was up for a couple of months, and then for whatever reason, they must have felt that they hadn't found quite the right candidate. And so sort of an existing connection that I had on LinkedIn sort of then got in touch with me to say, look, you sound like you might be a good fit for this role. And they told me a bit more about it. And then I thought, yeah, okay, I'll give it a go. And then I went through the sort of the formal process there. But the formal process in my case was I sent through my CV. I had an initial interview over the telephone, and then I went in for an in-person interview where I did a presentation. But it really does vary, I think, from role to role, particularly in the commercial department and depending on what level you're at. So there's not really a one size fits all, which again, I know is probably not what you guys are hoping for. But hopefully also you take that as a good thing. But I think there's probably, and I don't know whether this is, I certainly think it's something which F1 would always do, but I feel like it's something that all companies legally have to do. I mean, don't hold me to that, but any role you have to legally advertise, I think. I don't think you can just sort of have a role and decide that you only want to tell certain people about it. So if there is a job opening at F1, it will go up on the job page. Without a doubt. I feel like that's certainly happens at F1, and I think that is the law, but I might be talking absolute rubbish there, so don't quote me.
Well, it's good to know, hopefully, that any opportunities that do come up, any open vacancies, we will be able to see.
Yeah, you'll see them for sure.
Fab. So Carl Alford asks, how do you encourage more girls to come into IT or digital?
Hopefully with events like these, I suppose it's a good answer. Yeah, you know, it's by encouraging people is I suppose the stupid answer, but it is exactly what it is. You know, it's, as I sort of said previously, I'm very, very keen on getting more women into IT, into F1, into motorsport, because if you want to be there should be a place for you. And, you know, it's by doing events like these, which are really helpful because it means that we get to see that people are interested, and we get to hopefully make you think that you can get here if you want to. Yeah, just by encouraging, really.
Yeah,
all we can do.
Absolutely. I think that's really, really key as well, that we do mention that it's through exposure. So as you say, through events like this, that you see other females, if you are a female and you're wanting to get into a certain role in motorsport, having a role model that you can look up to and who inspires you is really valuable. And I don't know, did you have anyone like that, Amie or Amelia, when you were looking at roles?
Amie, do you want to go?
I was going to say probably not. I'm sort of sitting there thinking, who? No, probably not. But you know, it's amazing if you can have someone, and obviously if there are people that are there in a position you want to be, it's great to have people to look up to. As I say, when I joined, I was the only female for many years.
And Amelia, how about for you? Whether it was in the industry or not?
Yeah, I think that probably ties to my sort of suggestion of getting a mentor as well. I certainly know at F1 and but also at IMG, so people sort of further up the ladder, and you think you might think, I love the sound of their job, but you might also just find that you like the way they conduct themselves, you're impressed about the way they speak, or you've heard good things about them, or you've perhaps been in meetings with them and think that they've spoken well to clients, or you just sort of spot skills that you sort of admire. And on that, I'd always say don't ever worry about approaching those people. Sometimes in a big company, you might think, oh God, they're far too senior, they don't know me, they're on a completely different floor. But just sort of dropping them an email and saying, I'd love to know a bit more about what you do, can we grab a coffee? Or I'm I'm new here, I think this might be an area I want to move into, whatever it might be. I think people are really scared to do that, but most people love it because it's really flattering to them. Everyone likes to be told that someone wants to talk to them and know a bit more. And the worst that they'll do is say, no, sorry, I haven't got time. But I really think you'd be surprised at the few number of people who would react like that. So don't ever be worried about just saying hello and can you help me, because I think
out there.
Yeah
Definitely. I think that goes back to the networking as well. It's so key, especially in this industry where it is quite small. It looks big on the outside, but once you're in it, I think once you know one person, that opens another door elsewhere. But I think that is our final question for the evening. So it's a wrap from here. So thank you so much, Amelia. Thank you so much, Amie. It's been brilliant speaking to you both, learning about your roles, and the advice and insight that you shared has been really, really valuable, I'm sure, for the people listening tonight. Thank you all at home as well, for everyone who's still on the call. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. It's been wonderful to have you. Again, if you haven't already, please do follow Formula One, Girls on Track UK and Motorsport UK on socials. As I said earlier, there is a community page on Facebook for Girls on Track UK where you'll be able to connect with like-minded people, make new friends, see new roles or networking or sort of role opportunities, and just keep up to date with sort of general news. But also, most importantly, you'll be able to sign up to the remaining webinars this month and view any recordings that you might have missed of the previous ones. If you go into the chat, I believe the links should be in there, so you'll be able to find those. And again, as I mentioned earlier, there'll be a survey coming your way, no more than 5 minutes, so please do take the time. We'd really appreciate your feedback to see how you found this session and the sessions previously as well. Tomorrow, we have got Helena Hicks presenting, hosting the webinar for the An Evening With series. So that obviously will be continuing this month. Hope to catch you there and on the webinars to come. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Steph. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.